We'll let him introduce his team.
Got everybody on it.
I think so. Yeah.
You ready?
Yep.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to staff meeting Tuesday, April the 15th. Got a few things we'll be discussing today. Before we get started, I want to welcome and thanks for being here. Also, Harper County Commissioner Melinda McCurley. She's here. We just want to say hello. Welcome. Glad you're joining us today. Always good to have our neighbors here to chat. So welcome. All right, Tom, take it away.
One item today, we'll do the budget simulator will be next week. So this is it for today. This is Bob Penn is the acting director of PVD. He has graciously agreed to I asked him a couple of weeks ago for just a presentation, kind of an overview of what their office does and how they relate to the appraisers around the state, including our appraiser here in Sedgwick County. And I know Bob has got another member or two of his team. I'll just let him introduce. So Bob, take it away if you can hear me. You're muted, Bob. There you go.
Yes, thank you. Can y'all hear me good?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. My name is Bob Ken. I am the acting director for the Division of Property Valuation. The former director, Dave Harper, has retired and is no longer with us. So I am filling in temporarily until maybe a confirmation takes place. So what I think I was asked to do here today is to cover some things about the authority of the and the duties of the Director of Property Evaluation. Excuse me, I'm trying to get my PowerPoint going here. I'm just clicking on it. Okay. So again, what the duties and the authority of the Director of Property Evaluation was or is, and the appointment process and the qualification and the duties of the county appraiser. I've also incorporated some compliance information in here at the end of this presentation. So there are a lot of statutory references in here that we pulled out. So I want to, just forewarn you that there's a lot of stuff that I might just be reading because I don't know these statutes. Statutes are paraphrased. Obviously, we couldn't put them all in here, and so I might be reading a lot of them. But it'll kind of give you an idea, I hope, by the time we're done, on what PVD does, what the county is responsible for, what we're responsible for together as a county and a state agency, and a little bit about the compliance process. So who does what in the appraisal and the classification process? We're going to start with the county appraiser. The county appraiser appointment takes place on July 1 of each fourth year, every 4 years. And that appointment is made by the Board of County Commissioners or the governing body of any unified government. So the current appointment period ends on June 30th of this year in 2025. A reappointment will take place on July 1 of 2025. So Sedgwick County will be appointing an appraiser effective July 1, 2025. That county appraiser is appointed by the county commission, and that appraiser is employed by the county commission. And it says the Board of County Commissioners may unite with another county or counties to form districts to employ an appraiser. And this is more prevalent in smaller counties that have smaller staffs and where two counties or multiple counties can be run by a single appraiser. To be a county appraiser, the individual must have at least 3 years or 6,000 hours of mass appraisal experience. Must have successfully completed the eligibility exam that is sponsored by the Kansas Department of Revenue's Division of Property Valuation. And they must also hold one of the following designations, one being a certified general real estate appraiser, or number two, a registered mass appraiser, which is a designation sponsored by the Division of Property Valuation. So some authoritative things about the Board of County Commissioners and the Property Valuation Division. The Board of County Commissioners may suspend or terminate the appraiser if the appraiser has failed or neglected to properly perform the duties of the office by reasons of incompetency or for any other cause. If that were to take place, the appraiser has 15 days to file an appeal to the Director of PVD. The Director of Property Valuation also has similar authority and may issue an order to the Board of County Commissioners employing such appraiser to suspend or terminate the appraiser if the appraiser has failed or neglected to discharge such appraiser's duty as required by law. And that the interest of the public service will be promoted by the removal of such appraiser. If that were to take place, the appraiser has 15 days to file an appeal to the Board of Tax Appeals. It wouldn't make sense for the Director of Property Valuation to dismiss an appraiser and then have that appraiser appeal back to the Director of Property Valuation. So that appeal goes to the Board of Tax Appeals. Separation of service. When an appraiser is no longer holds the office of county appraiser, there was a statute updated or put into place here a couple years ago. The county commission shall immediately notify the Director of Property Valuation. The notification shall be made on a form provided by the director. And if the person no longer holds the office of county appraiser before the expiration of the 4-year term, or the person does not complete a 4-year term, then the notification shall include the reason for the separation of service. And the director shall make a notation on any eligibility list record of the person or persons, when the person does not complete a 4-year term. So we have that policy in place. We have a form when we have appraiser turnover in the county. We mail out the form and get that process started. So we really kind of instigate the process and get it going and make sure we get those forms on file here at the Division of Property Valuation. So some of the duties of the county or district appraisers, the county appraiser supervises the listing and the appraisal of all the real estate, personal property, and personal property in the county that's subject to taxation as of January 1 of every year. The exception to that would be state appraised property, which is the responsibility of the Division of Property Valuation. We do all the state public utilities. It's the duty of the county appraiser to follow the policies, procedures, and guidelines of the Director of Property Valuation in the performance of their duties. Follow any developed or adopted methodologies of the Director of Property Valuation to value specific types of property, and to prepare the appraisal roll and certify such rolls to the county clerk. we'll talk more about this in a minute, but we have we have guides that we provide to county appraisers for the appraisal of certain types of properties. And there's 5 of them. We'll go through them here in a little bit. You might see at the bottom of my slides as I go through this, we have provided some statutory references. If you all would like to, we get off this call and you'd like to go back and review any of this information, the statutes are presented throughout on these slides. So you have that to look back on. County appraisers shall conform to the methods, procedures, and forms used to value personal property as shown in the personal property appraisal guides, devised or prescribed by the Director of Property Valuation. So personal property there is a guide for personal property. We have specific forms for personal property that we provide to county appraisers for the valuation of personal property. The county appraiser shall supervise supervise appraisers and other employees in the performance of appraisal duties. Shall require every employee performing appraisal analysis functions to attend schools conducted or approved by the Director of Property Valuation or establish satisfaction to the director that the employee has received necessary training to perform the appraisal function. So long story short, the appraiser must make certain that the people that are doing the appraisal work in the office have the proper training to be able to perform the duty that they're being asked to do. Basic responsibilities of the county appraiser. To put it real bluntly, in a broad overview, the county appraiser is required to discover, list, and value property. But more specifically, they create maps. They're responsible for creating maps and having maps available. Records, they perform on-site inspections, responsible for maintaining inventories of records of all the parcels within the county. They need to determine if the property is taxable or if perhaps it could be tax exempt and not susceptible to taxation. They annually supervise the listing of all real and personal property except state appraised utilities. I covered that on a previous slide. As of January 1, again, reinspect all the property in the county once in a 6-year period. They annually value properties at fair market value, except in the case of perhaps agricultural use, an agricultural property which is appraised on its use value, and those values actually come from the Division of Property Valuation. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. The county appraiser lists and values in a uniform and equal manner. They conduct valuation appeals, and they prepare and certify the appraisal rolls to the county clerk. Okay. These statutes that cover this are defined in these duties that we've kind of discussed are defined in KSA 19400 and the 79-1400 series. So what does the Director of Property Valuation, what's their role in the process? Well, Director of Property Valuation should have the duty, the power, and authority to devise, prescribe, and assist with the use of uniform assessment forms, those records, maps, record cards, and other essential tools that we spoke about. Provide and enforce the use of uniform methods and forms for listing, assessment, return of property, and collection of taxes. He has the authority to devise, prescribe, and assist with the guides for the evaluation of personal property. And actually, again, I know this is duplication. There are 5 guides. Those 5 guides I'll just cover now are a grain elevator guide, a feedlot guide, a personal property guide, a affordable housing guide, and an oil and gas valuation guide. Directors shall provide general supervision and direction of county appraiser performance of the duties and regulate such performance. This comes in the form of a appraisal ratio study and a procedural compliance review. So we review both the statistical performance of a county, and we also look at the way that the county appraiser gets to the final values, the methods that they use. And we outline those methods, or what we feel like is acceptable. We expect county appraisers to generally follow those guidelines. Although to get there, there's different ways to get to the final values, but there's certain things that are required, and we'll cover that here in just a little bit as well. The Director of Property Valuation has the authority to render assistance to counties to determine fair market value and uniform assessments. We provide a lot of assistance, technical assistance with the CAMA program. We go out and we visit counties. We provide on-site assistance when applicable, and if we have the staff to do so. We were once a division of over 100 people, 120 people, and at one point in time, probably more than like 135 people, but that's been several years ago. We are now a division of about 43 people, full staff, and we run at about 37 people. So, when we talk about going out and providing assistance to the counties, that's if we have staff available to do so. We require county appraisers to meet with the director at least once every 2 years to discuss the matters of valuation and taxation. This is typically done at our annual director's update meeting, which is held in conjunction with the Kansas Association of Counties, the Kansas County Appraisers Association annual business meeting. So it's offered every year. Obviously, different information being presented, but to kind of keep in touch with county appraisers, there is an annual director's update. The director's duties also include providing general supervision of the statewide taxation system. He has the power to thoroughly investigate such system and formulate and recommend legislation for improvement of the system and for equalization in taxation. Says he has general supervision over the administration of the assessment and tax laws of the state so that all assessments of property are made relatively just and uniform and at market value. It's the duty of the director to make sure that the district or county appraisers and the county commission are assessing or appraising all property at market value. To confer, advise, and direct the duties of all county officials obligated to make levies and assessments. Direct proceedings for removal from office for misconduct or neglect of duty for those public officers failing to or neglecting to comply with orders of the director or statutory provisions governing assessment and taxation. And he has the authority to investigate work and methods in the assessment and taxation of property by visiting counties. And that goes back to our on-site visits, our compliance that we do, We assist with on-site visits. Our compliance process is a review of the methods and procedures being employed by the county. Director of Property Valuation has the authority to appraise and assess all public utility properties, to extend all statutory deadlines for the mailing of CVNs or valuation notices, to extend the certification of appraisal rolls, and the completion of the valuation and classification hearings, which in the judgment of the Director of Property Valuation may seem just and necessary to secure the orderly operation of the system of property taxation. So when the Director of Property Valuation has that authority to extend deadlines if it's in the best interest, I think, of the division and the county. Director of Property Valuation has the duty and the power and authority to adopt appraiser directives prescribing appropriate standards for the performance of appraisals in connection with ad valorem taxation. Currently, we have 31 active PVD directives. We use our directives to help clarify statutory items that may not be spelled out specific, as well as they should be in statute. And by drafting directives and providing those directives to counties, we are actually providing appraisal guidance to the counties in the form of a directive. It's the duty of the Director of Property Valuations to see that all appraisals are performed in compliance with the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice, or USPAP, as it's commonly referred to. The USPAP states that such appraisals shall be written appraisals. They're written appraisals in our CAMA system because we have forms that these appraisals are specified on. And the Director of Property Valuation may require compliance with additional standards. And those standards are things like ratio studies and, being able to gauge whether fair market value is being adhered to. So I said we had 31 directives. We have a list of the directives on our website. You can go out to the PVD website, and everything that's active is on the website. So those are all available. But again, I would stress that the purpose behind our directives that we provide to county appraisers is to provide guidance on things that are just not clear in the statute and or regulation or whatever it might be. So the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. The purpose of the standard or the USPAP is to promote a high and maintain a high level of public trust in appraisal practice by establishing requirements for appraisers. Says it's essential that appraisers develop and communicate their analysis, opinions, and conclusions to intended users of their services in a manner that is meaningful and not misleading. So, person wants an explanation of how an appraisal was done. They need to be able to explain that process to their, say a taxpayer, and be able to make them understand how that appraisal was finalized and how the value was established. The USPAP addresses the ethical and performance obligations of appraisers through definitions, rules, standard rules, and statements. So there's a definition section that establishes the application of certain terminology in USPAP. The ethics rule sets forth the requirements for integrity, impartiality, objectivity, independent judgment, and ethical conduct. We have record keeping rule, basically says that if you're working through an appraisal, you have to keep those records, that work file, and have everything that's associated with that appraisal in the work file and make that available to whoever would like to see that work file. It should be an open record in most cases. A competency rule says that the appraiser must be competent to perform an appraisal. And if they're not, then they need to take other provisions to either become competent or to have the property appraised by somebody who is competent. The scope of work rule presents obligations related to problem identification, research, and analysis. It's basically spells out how you're going to accomplish the project, the appraisal project. And the jurisdictional exception rule preserves the balance of use PAP if a portion is contrary to law or public policy of the jurisdiction. One example I can think of as far as a jurisdictional exception is concerned would be the appraisal of ag land, which is based on its use value and not market value, and that is set in statute. So that's how we do that would be a jurisdictional exception for the state of Kansas. So county and PVD. All counties in the state of Kansas are regulated by the Division of Property Valuation of the Kansas Department of Revenue. County appraisers are required to conform to this Kansas statutes and the Uniform Standard of Professional Appraisal Practice. We kind of just covered that. The county appraiser and PVD are required to follow Kansas Constitution and laws. The article in the Kansas Constitution is Article 11 for that covers finance and taxation. It talks about uniform and equal. The legislature shall provide for a uniform and equal basis evaluation and rate of taxation of all properties subject to taxation. It talks about market value, talks about use value, and it talks about classification. The county and PVD are required to follow the Kansas Constitution. 79-101 refers to all property in this state not expressly exempt shall be subject to taxation. It's the duty of the county appraiser to make sure that everything in the county is being that's subject to taxation is being appraised, except again for those utility properties. Each parcel of property shall be appraised at its fair market value in money. The value thereof to be determined by the appraiser from actual view and inspection of the property. KSA 79503A defines fair market value, which means the amount in terms of money that a well-informed buyer and a well-informed seller are justified in paying and accepting for property in an open and competitive market. And it talks about 79-1439, all real and tangible personal property subject to general ad valorem taxation shall be appraised uniformly and equally again as to class, and unless otherwise specified herein, shall be appraised at its fair market value as defined by that 79503A. And again, it talks about land devoted to agricultural use, which is not established, not valued at fair market value, but rather on its use. Okay, so some of the functions I think for PVD, so a little bit more specifically, I'm not sure this is an official mission statement, but I found this in some information that we had. But our mission statement would be to oversee the administration of the property tax laws of Kansas to ensure a fair and uniform method of property appraisal, assessment, and taxation. So I think that's, that's what we do up here. That's what we try to do. That's what we want to do. But property valuation is the Oversight and Performance Evaluation Agency. Again, we do look at procedural compliance. We look at the ratio study. From those two activities, we establish what we refer to as substantial compliance. Didn't realize this slide was like this, but we provide education and training. We provide training for valuation training. We provide training on the CAMA system, which is the computer assisted mass appraisal system, the various many functions within that system. We provide training on the valuation abstract, the value abstract, on data collection, but we teach annually approximately 75 classes. In 2024, we taught right at 75 classes. We provide technical support and on-site assistance. I've already talked about that. We set forth the rules for the appraiser qualifications. We do that through the Registered Mass Appraisal Regulations. We kind of talked about that a little bit. We establish directives, the guidelines, and the rules and regulations for appraisals. We provide the CAMA system and support the CAMA system that's used in all 105 counties statewide. We, as a division, appraise public utilities such as railroads, pipelines, electric companies, telephone companies, etc. We also, as I stated earlier, we set the ag use values up here. We don't appraise the ag land at market value. It's based on its use value. And we also develop a statewide abstract of values report for all 105 counties, breaks down the values by class, breaks down values in various ways. Breaks it down by assessed value, also has taxing information and taxing authorities for each county in there, and what the has mill levy information. So all this information gets brought together into a single document referred to as the statewide statistical abstract report. And that's done on an annual basis. We talked about the procedural review, procedural compliance. The statute, part of that procedural review is statutory compliance, the adhering to the laws of, say, mailing valuation notices, doing appeals on time, getting them completed on time, certifying values on time, and also the statistical aspect through the ratio study. We measure, basically through the ratio study, we measure the appraisal level and the appraisal uniformity. We review the appraisal level through the median ratio of the difference, the ratio of the appraised value to the sale price, and uniformity using the coefficient of dispersion. Every year, we somewhat separate out statistical compliance from procedural compliance, but on an annual basis, we present results of the ratio study to the Board of County Commissioners when the county is non-compliant. We present this information to the county appraiser every year, but we have to, I think we're bound by law to present information and visit with the county appraisers, the county commissioners. If a county is not in compliance what we refer to as substantial compliance. So the combination of the statistical compliance and the procedural compliance together, if they're out of that compliance review, then we are obligated to meet with the county commission and go through the report and explain some information. We all are required to submit a summary that includes the number of appeals filed and also the outcomes of the resulting those resulting appeals. You know, how many appeals were the value was changed on, how many appeals were a no change, etc. So if you haven't, if your county hasn't been out of compliance, substantial compliance, you probably haven't heard from us at that level. So what's required of the county appraisers? Well, there's a long list of things that we do through the compliance process that we require counties to adhere to. There's various phases, and I'll show you a better representation of what I'm talking about when I get to it. But we also established timelines. We established timelines for county appraisers to be able to complete or require counties to complete certain phases by a certain date. So you can see here that on October 15th of each year, we require the county appraiser to submit a quarterly report. They report to us on their progress quarterly, which is required by statute. And in that, so the quarterly report would be the first thing that would be required from a county, I think. We move on into November and December. We talk about reports being run. We're cleaning up a sales file. We're routinely, the county appraisers routinely reviewing sales for validity. They're looking at say a neighborhood analysis, make sure their neighborhoods are set up correctly, make sure they don't want to add new neighborhoods or combine neighborhoods, whatever that, you know, desired structure would be. It talks about land analysis, residential land trends, residential trend valuation, multiplier analysis, which would be, you know, modifying the cost approach that we use, et cetera, et cetera. So the story behind this is just to give you an idea of what the county appraiser goes through as they move through the evaluation process. So on January 15th, another quarter comes due. They're required to submit another quarterly report. We tell them what needs to be on that quarterly report and what they have to have done. And this is just another example of moving through the process. We provide by January 31st of each year, a mid-year report on where the county stands in the compliance process as we see it. So that's due to the counties, back to the counties on by January 31st of every year. April 15th is the start of the third quarter, or when is the third quarterly report is due. And then July 15th would be the fourth quarterly report. This is just an example of what we require from the county appraiser in the quarterly report form. This is just section F that happens to deal with depreciation analysis. It outlines the phases that we require out of them, even though the county appraiser gets to the end result a little bit differently than another county maybe, but they're all required to adhere to the same basic requirement. when a county appraiser submits a quarterly report, they actually sign off that they've did the work, that um, they've submitted it to us, and et cetera, et cetera. And so at the end of the day or at the end of the year, we have a quarterly report certification that says the county appraiser signed off on all four quarters. So let's talk about statistical compliance here for a minute. Again, we do it through the annual ratio study. We're required by statute to perform a ratio study. This has been going on since about 1992. We get sales validation questionnaires that come through the county. And PVD gets a copy of every questionnaire that the county appraiser receives in their office. I'm not sure where I was headed here with the appeal process, but for the ratio study, there is an appeal process. So the ratio study is conducted annually by PVD. Again, it's used to verify that the overall value conclusions meet minimum standards of accuracy, reasonableness, and consistency. For the appraisal level for both residential and commercial properties, those are the two primary classes that we measure. The median ratios must be between 90% and 100% fair market value, one being fair market value. And we actually use the 95% confidence interval. We don't use point estimates. So actually the 95% confidence interval should overlap into 90% to 110% in order for a county to be in compliance on the median ratio. We use the coefficient of dispersion. And so the median ratio measures the appraisal level. The coefficient of dispersion measures the uniformity. So the uniformity requirement is for the number to be 20 or less. And again, that's at the 95% confidence interval. If that confidence interval is if the actual confidence interval range is below 20, then that would be deemed to be in compliance. We also measure the price-related differential, which is a measure of vertical equity. And that price-related differential acceptable range is 0.98 to 1.03. Again, we don't report, we report it, but we don't use it in the to determine whether a county is in compliance or not in compliance. So a little bit about the most recent Sedgwick County compliance review, which would have been the 2024 version. We're always a year behind in applying the ratio study. So this would be the 2023 ratio study coupled with the 2024 procedural compliance review. You can see this is where the ratio study and the procedural review are meshed together to form that substantial compliance. And you can see there's points allocated to certain phases. There's points allocated to the ratio study, the statistical portion. And there's a total points possible and a total points received. And once we get through the procedural portion of it, at the bottom, we have a total score. There was 100 points possible. The total received was 90.8, and anything above 75 or above for substantial compliance is deemed to be in compliance. So Sedgwick County for this last period did a nice job. We won't have substantial compliance results. They typically come out in the August timeframe because we have to make sure we get through all the procedural aspects of the review, and then we have to roll those final ratio study results that will be completed in the July timeframe. So our substantial compliance review doesn't come out till August or maybe the 1st of September sometime. You might not be able to see this very good. These are the preliminary 2024 ratio study results that were sent out on March 15th. I put this in here so you can kind of see where the county stands for the most recent information that we have available. The median ratio for residential, and I'm only going to touch on the residential and commercial. The median ratio is at 85.78. The confidence interval indicates that median ratio is in a range of somewhere between 85.46 to 86.19. And the coefficient of dispersion for that subclass is 10.29. So what that tells me is that the county is consistent, they're uniform in the way they're valuing residential properties according to this study. And the ratio being at 85.78 means that it would indicate that their values are low compared to the sales being reported on the SVQs and being validated as valid, the sales that are being validated in the study. Commercial property, the median ratio is sitting at 82. We're 95% confident that the value, the real number, is between 76.5 and 87.89, somewhere in that range. The coefficient of dispersion, or the uniformity, is 24.63, which is not as uniform as the residential is. I would typically say that commercial properties are the CODs are a little bit more difficult to be consistent with because there's so many different types of commercial properties. And again, this would indicate that the median ratio being an 82 would mean that the values are low compared to the sales that are being reported on the SVQs coming to PVD and being used, validated and used in the study. Okay, so that kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of what 2024 brings to the table. There is an appeal process for the ratio study. That's another thing that takes some time. We allow counties to appeal sales that they don't feel like should be in the study. Sometimes there's appeals that are not in the study that the county feels like should be in the study. So I think we look at those also. We don't do, although we calculate numbers for vacant lots, farms that have ag land incorporated into them, ag land only, et cetera, et cetera. We look at those and calculate statistics, but we don't report them. I mean, we report them, but we don't use them for in the compliance process. Let's put it that way. A little history on the Sedgwick County numbers. This is the this is a 10-year history of where of what Sedgwick County has done. You can see their median ratio ranges from anywhere in the 85 to looks like 93% range. And CODs have consistently been good in the 10 to 11, 12 range. And, we can look at the PRD. We report the PRD, but again, we don't use the PRD for compliance purposes. It's a measure of vertical equity. So all in all, pretty good. And remember, we're using confidence intervals to measure statistical performance. These are point estimates. They are not, the confidence intervals are not included here. We switched to using confidence intervals 2 or 3 years ago instead of the point estimates. And so a lot of this, 2 or 3 years of this should have, if we were doing it and reporting it to you correctly on this screen, should show the confidence interval to see because from the point estimate, we can't really tell whether it's in or out of compliance. And that's just a product of this graphic, I guess. So if we plot those, you can kind of see, get a little bit different picture of it. I want the ratio to be between 90 and 110. You can see, actually, this might include the confidence. I'm not sure if those are actually being taken from. I'm not sure if these are point estimates or some of these could be confidence intervals, but you kind of see here when COVID came in at about 2019 and 20, and we started to see those values skyrocketing, especially in the residential values. And you can see where the county appraiser, it looks like they had a hard time keeping up with those trends. We had some very strong trends that this would probably be something that we would see in many counties. So and the COD for residential property needs to be less than 20. So you can see that they've done a good job being consistent with residential properties. Here's the commercial ratios, 10-year history. You can see a lot of the 80s, and when COVID crept its head, and you can kind of see the results dipping down into the 70s a little bit, and CODs remaining above 20. So I think the county would like to see those numbers obviously be below 20 to be in compliance. And there's kind of a graphical representation of the median ratio on commercial properties and the COD. And again, there's I guess I haven't showed this yet. This is the 10-year history of substantial compliance that incorporates both the procedural and the ratio. So the first column would be the ratio points. There's second column's the points possible. The third column's the procedural score, and then we wrap that up into an overall score, much like I displayed on one of the scorecards. The county's been in substantial compliance for the last 10 years, and the last column there just shows what from the procedural review how many phases did not were identified as being deficient, I guess is a good way to put it. So 2021, 2, 3, and 4 looks like they've done a really nice job being in compliance or with their procedural compliance. So that's what I have for you today. Now, I don't know if that's exactly what you wanted to see as far as what PVD, what authority the PVD director has, what the PVD, what PVD does. If you need more information, if I was off base on what I was asked to provide, but that's what I have for today. And I would open it up for any questions you all might have, if I can answer any questions.
Okay, Mr. Kent, thank you. I appreciate we all do this presentation. The genesis of this discussion was, as you are well aware, there's a broad conversation in the state and in Sedgwick County about property taxes. And it gets very difficult for us to separate the connecting points between property taxes and property valuation. So in order for us as commissioners to better communicate to our constituents, we wanted to have a real clear understanding of PVD, the discussions that happen at PVD, the relationship with the county. So this has been helpful, and I'm certain we're going to have a few questions and comments. I also want to acknowledge that our county appraiser is here, Mark Clark. Appreciate you, Mark. And Deputy County Appraiser Ronnie Tidwell is also here too. So, okay, commissioners, any questions or comments for Bob? Go ahead, Commissioner Bluebow.
Thank you, Chairman. I guess my first question, I want to start off, we talk about market value and we're trying to drive toward market value, but it seems like the past several years, they're using the cost approach more than the sales approach. So just trying to understand, has there been a change in direction there? Or, you know, with inflation and everything else, does cost approach really get us to market value? Because I'll say on residential right now, you're seeing sales substantially going down, things aren't moving, and it's just a different conversation. So I'm trying to see if we're really trying to deviate from the market value and drive everything toward a cost approach.
Those, you know, it depends on whether you're talking about commercial or residential property. For residential property, the county appraiser will develop a cost approach. Every parcel that's being appraised that's not state assessed will have a land value and a building value if there's a building there. But every parcel gets a cost approach. The parcels with residential dwellings would be properties that would be able to have a comparable sales approach, or some people refer to it as market approach, generated. So basically on residential properties, you're seeing two different values, a cost approach and sales comparison approach. We'd love to see those be a very close correlation between the two. Sometimes there's just not. Because of the type of property is, the location, the variables go on and on. But I don't know. I don't know that I could say, you know, the county appraiser would have a better idea what approach is being used, or if one approach is being favored over another. But they would have two different approaches to choose from as far as a system generated value. Now, we allow them a little bit of latitude. They could look at, you know, if they don't feel like there's been much change, we have what we call an indexed value, where we look at values in a neighborhood or a model area where maybe we look at that area and say the values are increasing at 4%. I mean, they have the ability to go in there and recognize that change, 4% change, and apply it across the neighborhood or the model area, or they could apply it to an individual property. But that's the county appraiser's responsibility. It's not PVD's. We probably have that information available to us, but we don't, you know, the fact they're using one approach over the other, I can't really comment on that. And I can't really say that one approach is coming in consistently higher or lower than the other approach. The county appraiser could probably do that. For the commercial properties, we don't have a sales comparison module. But for commercial properties, we, just like residential, they would receive a cost approach value. And if the county has the data to perform an income approach, they would have an income approach value as well to be able to correlate a final value from. So Sedgwick County being a large county, they get a lot of data. They have the data to be able to generate that income approach. So when they're looking at commercial properties, they're looking at two different approaches, the cost approach and income approach to correlate a value. And again, I can't say that one is consistently higher than the other. It just varies. It depends on the property. I would think that would be true of the residential properties as well. So maybe I'm not the best person to answer that question, if I'm understanding the question correctly.
I guess specifically if we're going to address the residential properties, several years ago, I'm an investor, buy properties. 20 years ago, if I bought a property for tax value, I think, it's probably a pretty good deal. Today, if you look at tax value, probably a good chance you're overpaying, or in the world I see, whenever you see so many of the properties that are taken out, you guys don't look at auction properties. You've got certain properties that you won't look at your equation. So really what's selling, it's a lower number residential, but it's the best, it's the market ready, it's properties that, homeowners are putting substantial amount of money in to sell. And then oftentimes through inspection negotiations, they're putting a new roof on. They may be putting 10, 15, 20,000 or more into selling that property. So when you only look at what's selling, and then you look at, for example, my district, there's a lot of deferred property out there that people are just struggling to stay in their house, to keep up with the bare minimum maintenance. So whenever we look at the compliance, it looks like you're driving that property up like that's a market ready property to sell. And that's really not an apples to apples comparison. So just trying to understand, has something changed with how you analyze property 20 years ago to today, or are you driving right up next to that actual sales price and really not any kind of fudge room for real estate commissions, for title fees? That can be another 10% right there. I mean, there's quite a bit more in the equation than just that sales price.
Well, I think each property's different. Are we doing anything different today than we did 20 years ago procedurally? I don't think so. I don't know what that would be. We get the sales come through the office. Our validation process has not changed. And to my knowledge, the county appraiser's process may have changed. I think, and I can't comment on that because I'm not really sure if they've had any procedural changes. But if you're asking me, I'm going to say that we haven't had any procedural changes as far as the valuation methodology in the last 20 years, or if that's your time frame. And again, if we look at the median ratios, the median ratios are still saying in Sedgwick County, I'd have to go back and look at the graph to be certain, but I think I can safely say that the median ratio, based on the sales that are coming through my office and the county's office, they're the same SVQs, the values appear to be about 10% lower than market value, or what the typical sales are indicating.
But you don't look at all sales. You're just looking at were you pulling out certain comparables, right? You're not looking at overall sales, or is that your analysis on certain comps you pull out?
Well, there'll be more sales in the database and in the call it the sales extract file that's being used. But yes, when we're looking at a comparable sales approach and we're trying to pull comparables to satisfy the comparable sales approach, we're pulling 5 sales, and the appraiser in the process, the appraiser establishes the criteria for the comparable selection. Okay, it may be, they may weight neighborhood high. They may, we'd like to have those comparables within the same neighborhood of a subject property. We might have weight square footage high. We might weight quality, year built, those types of things. Those types of things are appraisal judgment on how you weight those things and what variables are being used to establish the comparables. That varies from county to county, and so certainly that could change. But are they doing anything in Sedgwick County that's different than what they did 10, 15, 20 years ago? I don't know. We get smarter as we time goes on, and some of those methods or the things that they might have are doing and as part of the appraisal process could have changed, if you're talking about things like that. So, but as far as the comparable sales process and working through the comparable sales approach, I would say that, we have had minimal change, if any, over the last 20 years. But again, that comp selection process, it's set up annually. It's appraisal judgment. What is the most important criteria to select to use in comp selection? I think you have to ask yourself that question, and then you have to go apply that and see if it's working for you.
I've got several other questions. I got to ask one quick one and then I'll pass it on. But what's the relationship with PVD and the Board of Tax Appeals? And the reason I'm trying to better understand this, because we look at some of these outliers, you can say, okay, you're hitting it at 90%, but some of these outliers are way out there. So we've got to make sure that they've got a fair check and balance system. So when you look at the Board of Tax Appeals, I'll tell you personally right now, I'm 3 years in now, 22, 23, 24, now 25. What's the timeline for that? Because we've got to have some way to deal with some of these outliers.
When you talk about the Board of Tax Appeals, are you talking about in 3 or 4 years? Are you talking about you have an appeal that's still pending?
Right.
Yeah. Well, first of all, PVD, if we get our relationship with the board is, really independent. We're really independent. I mean, we receive monthly, I would think, maybe monthly, a little bit more often. We receive the dockets so we can kind of see what kind of properties are being appealed in what counties. We don't, we don't have anything to do with their process as far as hearing or scheduling appeals or anything like that. We're totally independent from that process. So, and I understand what you're saying. I know they're short-staffed. I know there's been some legislation introduced to try to get them some additional funding to kind of restore things the way they were. But yeah, as far as our relationship with them, we'll, if they ask us for something, which is rare, we might help provide information to them. But as far as scheduling, hearing, and making decisions on appeals, exemptions, and things like that, we look to them to provide guidance on a lot of that stuff. And each appeal is independent, so and we have nothing to do with those appeals, the results of those appeals. So so I would say we're independent. Somebody PVD staff that are on the line, if you have any, you see it any differently, chime in.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner. I would say again, the end goal here is to try to help educate us so we can educate our constituents. So Mark, if you've got anything you ever want to add or chime in, you're welcome to do that. Okay. Other questions? Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as we get started here, you made a comment a minute ago, and I think I would have said, I actually have a question that relates to this that's from some experience I've had here at the county. But you made a comment a little bit ago about there is some method variation from county to county. Can you please describe, what do you mean exactly by that?
Well, I think were you talking about the sales comparison approach?
Not necessarily. I think there may be other things.
Okay. Well, if in general analysis, some of the more sophisticated counties, I would like to say some of the bigger counties, they have more people, they have more, a lot of times they have more tools at their disposal, such as, statistical packages and things like that smaller counties don't have. We provide a lot of templates for the counties, as far as the regression model for the sales comparison approach is embedded in the system. That's the only valuation tool available to a county appraiser in their CAMA system. Everything else is done outside the system. Okay. We can store income and expense information in the system. We can plug information into the income and expense module. We can load cap rates in there, but the analysis that takes place before it gets into the system is done outside the system, and it can be done in numerous ways. We have, for example, we have a commercial and a residential depreciation template that we provide the counties. They work really well, and many counties use them. But a lot of the bigger counties that have statisticians on board, they will use statistical programs such as SPSS to get their numbers, and then they'll plug them into the system. Where a smaller county might use our template and plot graphs and calculate the percent goods through for each CDU level, for example. It's just a different process. There's many things that a bigger county does because of the sheer size of a Sedgwick County or a Johnson County that a small county wouldn't do. The appraiser takes on a different role, I think, in a large county than what the small county appraiser does. In a small county, that appraiser might be out data collecting. That appraiser might be doing all the analysis. That appraiser might be doing all the final review and establishing values. In a big county such as Sedgwick, I'm doubtful that happens. Just because there's the hierarchy of the office. So
I guess the reason yes, the reason I'm asking is because the requirement for uniform and equal is a state requirement. It is uniform and equal across the state of Kansas, not just across the Sedgwick County or any other county. And so we have communities like Andover, even Mulvane or City of Sedgwick and other places where we have more than one county, if you will, doing appraisal work. And there's houses literally in the same neighborhood that are in different counties, for example. And if they're using different processes or different methods in those different counties, then I would say there's an inherent opportunity for non-uniformity and non-equal to happen because we don't have uniform methods across county lines. And so one of my concerns is if there's going to be a difference in how things are done, let me ask you this way. Who in Sedgwick County has the authority to make the decision on the methods going to be used in Sedgwick County?
Well, in my mind, the county appraiser, and I recognize what you're talking about. You've got a community, or it could be a residential community, or excuse me, a rural residential community that has a county is divided by a county line, and you have maybe the Butler County appraiser doing valuing some properties, and you have the Sedgwick County appraiser looking at some properties, and you're saying they could be doing it two different ways, coming up with two different values, or two different ranges of values for the two sides of the line, I guess. But yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Who I do know that we've had counties that have properties, and two different counties that have the same types of properties across county lines, and they do get together and confer once in a while, or they have in the past. But how you approach that as far as uniformity, I'm really not sure. The two counties are independent of one another. I get what you're saying about uniformity, but I don't know how to, unless the county appraisers got together and had some discussion about how to approach those types of neighborhoods or model areas across county lines. I don't know how you do it.
I think it's an issue that needs to be discussed. And let me give you one example. When I first became a county commissioner, the following year, this precedes Mark, he probably knows where I'm going with this. Our county appraiser made a decision independently to extend the depreciation schedule of outbuildings. And the county commissioners were not consulted. The state PVD had nothing to do with that decision. It was done by the authority of the county appraiser. And what happened was the following year, people saw their outbuildings spiked in value, and they were wondering why did that happen? Well, it traced back to the idea that the depreciation schedules were increased from like 20 years to 50 years or something like that. And in doing that, the valuation of those properties spiked. And again, so I asked the question at the time, well, who made this decision? And he said he made that decision. I said, is this statewide? And he said, no, this was a local decision. And I just brought up this issue that said, if you can have local decision that changes the assessed value of a property within Sedgwick County simply by a policy that you, excuse me, you made a decision independently to do this. That is inherently not uniform and equal. And so I would have rather had that been something that had been statewide at the same time. If it was the right thing to do, then the state PVD should have, if you will, done this statewide. But it was a local decision. And I don't think that type of method should be decided by our appraiser, because it changes the assessed value. Ultimately, you mentioned tax dollars a couple of times in your presentation. I would argue that the county appraiser should have no interest whatsoever in tax dollars. His only job is to determine a fair assessment for every property. And what happens after that is not his business. And so his role is not to increase assessment values or to decrease assessment values. Let me ask you a more pointed question. This is going to be, we get accused a lot of people saying, well, it's your appraiser. You need to get him under control. You need to tell him what to do. And I always respond to that. The county appraiser does not work for us. And what I mean by that is we are not his, we don't supervise. In fact, you said in one of your first slides, the role of PVD is to supervise the work of the county appraiser. In fact, you have a number of things you do to judge the performance of the county appraiser. The county commissioners do not direct the county appraiser to increase or decrease properties. Now, there'll be some places in some counties, I would expect that there may be some accusation that you're just telling them to increase values because you want more tax dollars. I've heard that lots of times. Or other ones says that You need to tell him to decrease values. And again, I would say in either case, we don't ever tell them to decrease values, and we don't. I don't really think he's trying to increase values to somehow give us more tax dollars. They're both not true. And I say that because I don't think we have the authority in any way to direct him on how he does his job. He is completely subject to state law and procedures and policies that are created by the Department of Revenue under the Property Valuation Division. He is loyal to those. That is his authority. That is his supervision comes from PVD, not from the county commissioners. Can you please speak to that?
Well, I would largely agree with that. I think it is the appraiser's responsibility. In other words, if the county commission went to the county appraiser and said, we're getting tired of hearing from these property owners, and we want you to appraise at 80% of market value. That's something that the appraiser can't do statutorily, because it's their job to appraise at fair market value in most cases. And as far as the appraiser doesn't work for PVD. The appraiser works for the county, and the commission appoints that county appraiser. In my mind, that county appraiser works for the commission that appoints them. Okay. Property valuation provides the oversight to that county appraiser on and how they generally do their job. And they do that through statute, through guidelines, through directives, through maintenance specifications, et cetera, et cetera. So I would maintain that the the appraiser does have that authority. And I agree that the commission does not have the authority at that level to dictate the values that are established by the county appraiser.
Okay.
But that county appraiser still reports to that county commission. I'm sure you guys meet periodically, and he reports to you. You sign his paycheck, et cetera, et cetera. So in my mind, he works for the county commission, but he adheres to some rules that are provided by statute and directives and the director of property valuation, et cetera, et cetera.
The real reason that you're here before us this morning is this exact issue. We've talked about a lot of things today, but this is exactly the issue. We do not have the ability to create a directive to the county appraiser on how he does his job. You say he works for us. Okay, we provide an office, provide computing equipment, we provide staff, we provide vehicles, but we don't provide, if you will, guidance on how to make appraisals in any way. That entire responsibility is between him and PVD and the state laws, procedures, and policies that you guys have created. As far as I'm concerned, in terms of his day-to-day work, he is not supervised or directed by the county commission in any way. Now, again, there is a couple of things. In the past, I've heard people say things like, I had a really horrible meeting with the county appraiser during my appeal. It was really bad. They treated me badly. And so we got involved and said, all right, you can't treat your people badly when this happens. And so we intervened in that regard. Okay. In fact, I think we mandated that they can videotape and audio tape those meetings if they want to do that, just to create a witness of what is being said. And that's totally fine. We want that to happen. We want to make sure we provide the adequate spaces for these appeals to happen. Yes, we provide the mechanisms to do his job. But in terms of actually how he does his job, the data, the directives, the statistical analysis, the supervision, and all ties back to state laws in one way or the other. None of that part of his job has any control by the Board of County Commissioners. So again, we can sit here and point fingers at each other. The reason people are mad about the tax system is they believe the appraisal system is broken. And I shake my head and say, listen, I hear what you're saying. I think there's a lot of opportunities for improvements. And I'll just get down to this. I think there's always going to be some subjectivity built into the system, because ultimately there's a human being at the end of that process that says, I think the property is worth this or that. They make a judgment at some point, and that, again, that can be second guessed. And we say there may be some error, maybe it's overvalued a little bit or undervalued a little bit. That's the subjective part of this. And again, I don't think we have any way to make that better because of what we do as a Board of County Commissioners. We can't direct him. We can't change the rules he lives by. That's all done in your department. And so when people get mad about that, our standard answer is, listen, again, regarding how he does his job, how he appraises property, we have no control over the appraiser. He works for the state of Kansas under the PVD department. That is a truth. We should not disagree on that. We don't have control over the appraiser. And if we do, please clarify that, because we might have a few things we do differently here, but I don't think we have authority to change how he does his job. And I think I need PVD to concede that point. That is a truth. I want you, sir, to agree with us that in terms of how he does his job, the statistics that he follows, the mass appraisal system that he follows, all of that is guided by the PVD, and we have no power whatsoever, no authority to direct him in those matters. Am I correct about that?
No, I can't concede that he works for the Division of Property Evaluation. I can't do that. Again, we have laws in place. We have directives that we feel like help define the law or clarify information that's not clear in law. We provide guides, we provide forms for them to report on, we provide the CAMA system, but that appraiser does not work for the Division of Property Evaluation. I can't concede that.
You've not provided a copy of your PowerPoint slides to us yet, but you'd said earlier you supervise listings of all real estate and all real and personal properties. You ensure they follow policies, procedures, guidelines, follow methodologies of the director, prepare the role and certify their data to the county. We county commissioners can't do any of those things.
Mm-hmm. I would agree.
I guess I'm having trouble understanding why it is that you're insistent that says that he works for us when we have no authority to direct how he does his job. And you do. You have the ability to change policies and procedures. You have the ability to judge him year by year on statistically. You mentioned this numerous times to verify his performance, and if you will direct him to change things to call him into compliance, if you will. You verify he has compliance, and if he doesn't, you issue directives to the county appraiser to make corrections. The oversight of this office is in your department.
I would agree. The oversight is in our department. We are the oversight agency for, in my mind, all 105 counties. I agree with that.
I have a personal opinion, and I honestly think one of the problems we have right now is the county commissioners do, in fact, provide the tools and the space and the things that are needed for the appraiser and his staff to do their job. And I think Mark Clark's a fine person. This is not a personal comment. I just think the county, the appraisal system needs to belong to the state entirely. As long as we're going to have the system we have in place today, we're going to have variation from county to county that frankly is not controlled by the BOCC, and it's actually not controlled by the PVD. But I think these variations are creating a ununiform and unequal appraisal system from one geographic part of the state to the next. I think that in order to have more uniformity and more equity, the state needs to own this process top to bottom. And again, the only thing we really provide is the financial support to keep the office operational. That's where our responsibilities end, and everything else at that point goes back to your office. And again, I would argue, I think for PVD to say that the appraiser is supervised by us in any way, it gets down to I think maybe the human resources part of that, where again, if he treats someone badly, we might have an opinion about that. But regards to how he does his job, whether he increases property values or not, or decreases property values, or whether he's in compliance or not, we have no authority whatsoever to even speak to any of that. So, and again, this, for some reason, PVD has been not willing to accept that truth that you have that authority to oversee and to supervise and to direct where we don't. Okay, I think we have a role to play. I'm not going to say we don't have a role to play, but it's not in the day-to-day work of the appraiser. And I would like to go on. There's a few other things here, and again, so I would. You mentioned the sales ratio study. I think Commissioner Bluebach kind of touched on this a minute ago. There is a subset of sales that go to that study. It is not all not all residential properties end up in that study. It's a subset, and I don't know why that is. Why are we not using all of the sales for the entire year for every property that's sold? Why is it not inclusive of all properties?
We actually, this last year, we did use all sales. And we did that on, some feedback from your appraiser, Mark Clark. And we did that. And you're referring to the sampling process that might use 400 sales as opposed to 7,500 or 8,000, whatever you guys have down there. I'm not sure. I think I saw a number of 7,500. We did use all sales last year, and for all counties. And when we look at the end results, we don't see a lot of difference between what was used in the sampling process and what is used, what the outcome of using all sales. We are having some discussions on whether we want to return to the sampling process or continue to validate all sales or review all sales, not validate them all, but review them all. So yes, for this past year, we did use what you're seeing in the 2024 preliminary study was based on all the sales that came through our office and the county's office.
Okay. During your presentation, you said that the appraiser does, they advocate to the legislature regarding laws that impact the property tax appraisal process. Did you guys testify on SCR 1603 or HCR 5011 this year regarding the averaging of property values over a number of years or a cap of property values? Did you guys testify on that?
We did not.
Okay.
To my knowledge.
Are you aware of what's being discussed in the state?
Yes.
Okay.
With 1603 and 5011?
Yes.
Yes.
If that was to pass, how is that going to change what we do? I mean, it seems to me there's going to be a lot more data to be recorded, and then more than one value for each property will have to be tracked. We have a plan on how we're going to do that if that was to pass?
Not specific plan at this point.
Mr. Chairman, I got about 5 more questions, but I'm going to stop. I think I've talked long enough. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Meister.
Mr. Kent, thank you and your staff for this presentation, and thanks for bearing with us on these questions. Mine is a simple one. I just had one. You referred to the US PAP standards of professional. So we've seen some data from around the country where Kansas sits in this property tax world, and it's been very helpful. Commissioner Howell does some research and provides information for us. But so my question is, as I look at all these other states that do, I mean, every state has property tax of some level of contribution to their budgets. Are your policies in Kansas consistent or guided by this USPAP standards? Are these national standards? that
They're industry standards, yes.
industry. Okay. And then that's why you had the 31 directives, or maybe in differential to, or in addition to the standards. Is that what those 31
Well,
directives are?
in my mind, the directives help clarify laws
Okay.
that are in place that might be vague.
In Kansas.
In Kansas.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes. Our
Okay.
directives are specific to Kansas.
Okay. All right. So thank you. So I just wanted to, it's comforting to know that there are some, some nationwide standards as well, or compliance issues that you follow. Thank you.
Commissioner Bluebow.
Thank you, Chairman. I kind of want to elaborate on some of my previous discussions where we kind of get into check and balances. So I'm trying to better understand where the check and balances are. So say you have an appraiser or somebody from the appraiser's office that, is done something unethical, maybe perjured themselves or looked into a house or something like that you're not supposed to do. Do we have any state professional standards? I mean, is there, you look at the code of conduct, police officer, sheriff's officer stops you, arrests you, and, something happens in altercation, you're going to have a code of conduct that, hey, I'm going to file out a complaint, professional standards is going to look at that. Do we have any kind of check and balance if there was an abusive appraiser or something that happened like that? How would that be handled today?
Standards and ethics.
I think, as far as ethics are concerned, we do have a standard in USPAP, an ethics provision. But if we have something reported to us at the division, I think we handle those on a case-by-case basis. And I think it would just anything that we would act on would have to be first reported to us, and I don't think there's anything set in stone that we do. I think that we would just review it on an individual basis.
Okay, so there's no panel, there's no one from PVD that would investigate a complaint against an appraiser, or would they bounce it back to the county? And then I get back to the feeling that what I'm hearing today is we can only hire or fire an appraiser. We really can't do anything outside of that.
No, I think we investigate issues. We have in the past, and we look into them, but to what degree, I think it depends on the situation. I think there's a lot of things that get brought to our attention that maybe aren't really our issue, such as zoning comes up once in a while. Zoning is something that is totally that we don't have, in my mind, have jurisdiction over, and we've had zoning questions in the past, and stuff like that. But we investigate. Now, do we investigate? If you're talking about personal conduct, we would only investigate personal conduct if it was brought to our attention.
Where would that? But you would investigate personal conduct of an appraiser?
We would investigate it, yeah.
But you really don't have a process for it or anything like that. You don't have anything in writing that says how you would handle that.
I don't think we don't have a formal process to my knowledge.
Mr. Kent, my name's Ted Smith. You mind, Commissioner, if I sort of step in and help supplement that answer? Yeah, we have a pretty robust process and statute. I think it's like 1779, like 1402, 1403 general duties. And there's about 17 or 18 criteria that we evaluate county appraisers. And we have investigated them mostly on constituent complaints, and we follow up on those. And in those cases where we do have removal, we have we have authority to enforce removal from office. It's not commonly used. And we normally will deal with cases through the Kansas Administrative Procedures Act regarding terminations. So we do deal with those probably 2 or 3 times a year.
Okay, where would a constituent go to find that information?
Well, they would basically reach out to their local county commissioners, Commissioner Blueball. They reach out to the PVD, and it would also come up during conversations during the informal hearings that are going on right now, and also through the BOTA review process. It is not unusual for BOTA to refer a case that it may have concerns about that we review through the language in the BOTA order.
So you're saying if I have a constituent complaint, they come to me, I email it to PVD, or what exactly do I do with that?
You know what we could do is we could develop a process through the Kansas Association of Counties and through the Appraisers Association to better facilitate those communications.
Okay.
But what's important is for the commission to know is that there's already the BOTA appeal process for valuations. And most of these complaints are going to have to do with the valuation.
Right. But
Where
when you're
Mr.
backlog 3 and 4 years, it gets people pretty frustrated.
Right. And Mr. Kent and I, what we're really concerned about is uniform and equal. When I heard you talk about, or Commissioner Howell talk about houses on one side of a county border being charged, valued differently in the nearby county, that's a specific concern to us, because uniform and consistent is really sort of the guiding star for us.
I got one other quick check and balance question, if that's okay. And I'm trying to understand, okay, so you guys don't have anything to do with the Board of Tax Appeals, but whenever you go to the Board of Tax Appeals, they're going to use the data from PVD, right? Isn't that a conflict of interest? I mean, shouldn't they have their own objective data, or is it just kind of like, well, no, we're going to use the data from whatever the county submits. Or are they bringing in their own independent data?
Mr. Kent, do you mind if I answer this question again?
That's
Since
fine.
we're sort of getting in on legal issues.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about appraisal methodology is that the standards we have adopted are commonplace in at least 45 other states. So this concept of registered mass appraiser and this concept of USPAP compliance, it carries over across the country. And those are the standards that we are encouraging the appraisers, and we are providing in guides that BOTA may or may not rely upon. So yeah, we help provide the valuation standards, but really we're pointing to a national standard so that we can always argue that we're uniform and consistent. So we don't really have control over BOTA. It's an attorney, an accountant, and an appraiser. They're independent of us. They do give some deference to many of our guides that we create for specialized property types. But when it comes to residential property, they're experts of their own accord, and they're well versed in consideration of the different, comparable sales, income, cost approach, trending analysis, and then they evaluate the subjective determination of the appraiser.
And I know it's not fair for me to ask you to answer for BOTA, but in your experience, have you seen them go out and get their independent data, or do they just use what comes from PVD?
Well, that sort of depends on what the case and controversy is, right? In cases involving commercial properties, which your staff there in your county are some of the best at commercial valuations, because it is the most challenging aspect of valuations. It is up to the taxpayer, the landowner, and the county to provide this data. BOTA sits as simply a court. They consider whatever evidence is submitted to them. Now, with a residential valuation challenge, they're a lot more open to the taxpayer, because most of those are pro se. So I think they're have a wider gamut of what they'll consider as far as argument is considered. And that case is really case by case.
Thank you.
Hey, Commissioner Wise.
Yeah, quick question. When you were going through your presentation, Mr. Kent, you mentioned that there's some more sophisticated tools that are available for some of the larger counties in the state. I believe we're the second largest county in the state. So I'm wondering, are there more tools that are available that we don't currently have access to that we should? Or you had mentioned the SPSS, and I can't remember if you really went into what that system is, but just I'm curious. I believe we're a pretty sophisticated county, and especially with our size, are there tools that we haven't been asking for or that we haven't been provided by from the PVD?
We don't provide those tools. We provide a camera system. SPSS, I believe, is a statistical, it's a regression tool. And it's very complex. I probably can't begin to explain, its capabilities, but whether you employ that in your county or not, I'm not sure. Could be a variation of that. And you might not be using anything like that. I don't know.
I think, Mark, do you have my answer?
SPSS.
Okay, you do.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just concerned that there was something out there that maybe we weren't utilizing, but it
I
sounds
try
like
to
we
get
are.
every tool I can.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Looks like we've wrapped up the questions here. Everything that I had, I've marked off the list in the discussion and the presentation. So at this point, Mr. Kent, we just want to thank you guys from PVD. This was important for us. This topic on valuations and then leading to property taxes is obviously top of mind for many people across the state and our state legislators, which means we hear about it quite a bit as well on the local level. So this has been helpful. Your presentation hit on a lot of points and a lot of clarity that I think we needed so we can better advise our constituents. And so you and your staff, we're grateful that you took a lot of time to spend with us. And if you have any other follow-up questions, we'll just reach out via Mark or reach out via email and see if we can get some clarity on that. So again, thank you. We appreciate the time.
You're welcome.
Okay, Tom. Mark, any feedback or thoughts or any clarity or?
Well, Bob did mention the 2024 sales ratio report, the preliminary. And the other day we started getting feedback on the final. And of course, we won't have the final numbers until August. However, I did request, and they were a little low, but I did request that PVD go ahead and apply the time trend as published in the February newspaper article. And that got us in on the confidence interval for commercial, and we were in on residential. And so if Bob doesn't give me any bad news between now and then, I may be sitting pretty.
Yeah.
Which makes me kind of happy.
Yeah, certainly. Well, appreciate that clarity, Mark. It's helpful. And this process is going to continue. These conversations will continue. So, and what I am grateful is our county appraiser, his deputy, they're frequent visitors over here to the 6th floor of the Ruffin building. So there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of communication, and this has been a helpful process for us today. So commissioners, any other questions or comments? Seeing none. Tom, anything else? Okay. See everybody tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Thank you again, Bob and staff. Thank you again for joining us. We're grateful.
You bet. Thank you.